Welcome to Sunday morning virtual worship. My name is Amanda, and today is April. I'm trying to jump ahead in time. April the 18th, 2021, the third Sunday in Easter. We want you to know that you are a gift. We give thanks for your presence here. We are so aware there are so many other things you could be doing right now, and you are joining us in worship, and we celebrate that. You are a gift, so go and be a gift for a world that desperately needs your giftedness. We have a virtual greeter with us in the chat today. Her name is Sarah Holler, and she is our designated individual who will help you if you have any questions or concerns, or if you need anything at all. Holler for Sarah, no pun intended. And there are usually several other friendly people in the chat to help you as well, because we want your experience here today to be as positive as possible. Have a couple of NoMoFoMo announcements today. NoMoFoMo stands for no more fear of missing out, because we don't want you to miss out on anything. So the first one is very important, and that is this. We need the names of graduates. Graduates from high school, graduates from undergrad, graduates from grad school. We need their names and contact info ASAP. So if you could email those to us at riseharrisonburg@gmail.com. Again, riseharrisonburg@gmail.com. Send us a name and some way to contact them. We would really appreciate that, but because on May the 2nd, we are going to celebrate our graduates both in our virtual worship experience, but also in person. This is really, really exciting. We are going to gather at 2 o'clock on May the 2nd at Purcell Park, outdoors. It'll be safe, we promise. We're going to play some games together, and we're hoping that you will come to congratulate our graduates and so that we can get to know our students here at Rise better. So again, May the 2nd, we're really hoping for good weather. We have cornhole planned and several other fun games. Join us. And then our other announcement is this. We need some more virtual greeters. We will give you a basic training, answer any questions you may have, and you're probably committing to like once every month or so, once every 4 to 6 weeks. So if you'd be interested in serving as a virtual greeter for Rise's virtual worship experience, please, again, email us at riseharrisonburg@gmail.com. Another thing you could do is let us know in the what do you need box, which I'll mention in a minute. So virtual greeters, let us know about any graduates from high school, college, undergrad, or grad, and think about it. Serve as a greeter. I also want to plug our offering this morning. We had a strong month of March, and we're very, very grateful for that, and we continue to need your financial support for the ministries of the Rise community. There are many ways you can give. You can give by Venmo, PayPal, on our website, cash, check. We still check the mail, by the way, if you want to mail us a check. And we are very close to introducing a new platform called Venko, which will enable you to easily set up recurring giving, automated giving, which makes your life much easier. So that's going to be discussed, I'm going to guess, in the next week or two. Thank you for your support. You have been so incredibly generous. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now I want to mention one of the vibrant ministries here within the Rise community, and that is what we call plus groups. And I could go on and on and on about how important plus groups are, about the difference they're making in lives, about how important they've been, especially over the past year. But you know what? Why don't you hear from 2 plus group experts we have here at Rise? So I want to introduce the amazing Christine Jones, who is our plus groups coordinator, and Sarah Mahood Warmoth, will talk a little bit about her experience. So Christine and Sarah, take it away.
Sarah, MW, thank you so much for being with me to talk about plus groups.
No problem, Christine.
Have you experienced group environments before through a church? And if so, could you kind of tell me how that was for you?
The experiences I've had before with groups, with church, have been book study groups, Ubuntu groups through Rise, where we would tackle a certain book or subject matter, and we would read through the book, and we would come together and discuss, and those were great. I've had great experiences with groups through Rise.
Since you've been in a plus group, the format has been a little bit different, hasn't it? So
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the things we've done in our group, and what were your favorite kinds of content that we did?
One of my favorites has been listening to the Nadia Bolz-Weber Confessional podcast, and knowing that even in our worst moments, we're still loved by God and cared for. And the other experience through our plus group that I've really enjoyed is when we've done like deep dives into our own autobiography of ourselves, and you get to really know the things that people have been through and how that shapes them now. And both of those really have made an impact on me.
Yeah, I agree. And I loved doing our stories as well, because it made me feel really connected to you guys, sort of on another level. What would you say being in a plus group contributes to your life?
It gives me a handful of people that are in my corner, that are rooting for me. They're like we're like a family. We're all wanting to see each other succeed and here to listen to each other's challenges and problems throughout the week, and we're there for each other, and that's really important.
Yes. And thankfully, we also make each other laugh like a lot.
Yes. All the laughter.
If you could use, let's say, an adjective or a describing phrase to describe or explain our plus group to other people, what would you say?
Goofy goobers, yet insightful.
Love it. Well, I love being in a group with you, Sarah, and I thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today.
No problem. Always happy to help.
Thank you so much, Christine and Sarah. You saw the info there at the end, plus groups at riseharrisonburg.com. If you want to know more or be a part of one, please reach out. They will change your life. Hey, I have a question for you. We've been asking this for several weeks now, actually several months now. What do you need? What do you need? As we seek to support one another, as we seek to want to pray for one another in more specific ways, we ask this question: what do you need? Physically, mentally, emotionally, in whatever way, what are your needs? We will do our best to be a part of helping to meet those needs. So you should see a magical box pop up right now, and that's a place for you to enter what you may need. And those go to a safe, confidential space, and then we respond in whatever way seems appropriate. Also, remember, if you want to enter your interest in being a virtual greeter, you could do that there, and or names and info of graduates if you would choose to do that instead of emailing. So use the What Do You Need box. We greatly, greatly appreciate hearing from you. Our morning prayer will be led by the amazing Christine Jones once again. So, Christine, please lead us in prayer.
Good morning, friends, and happy spring. As we move into our time of listening and discussion today, I'd like to pose some questions for reflection. How has your perspective of the world, of people, and of yourself changed since meeting and walking with Jesus? Can the divine work in us and through us without our willingness to see our path through God's eyes? And does seeing in this way require resolve or surrender? Just some things to think about this morning. Let's move into our time of prayer. This one is written by a Reverend Frank Schaefer. Meet us, Lord, on the path to Emmaus. Guide us on the road toward our destination. Renew our strength as we continue to walk and commune with you. Open our eyes so we see the signs of your presence around us. Open our hearts so we may receive your peace and love, and empower us to pass on to others the grace you have shared with us so freely. Amen.
Thank you so much, Christine. We greatly appreciate your prayers, and stunningly beautiful background there, by the way. Loving those azalea bushes. Our first song today is one that we often sing on Easter morning. We didn't this year, but this is still the season of Easter, as I said at the beginning of our time together. This is the third Sunday in Easter. We continue to celebrate Easter for 6 weeks. So this song is a classic. I think of Easter when I hear it. A classic song by Mumford & Sons called Awake My Soul, and this will be played by Maggie Hagee. So, you know what? You can stand or sit and just kind of absorb how beautiful this song is, or I encourage you to belt it out at the top of your lungs, because I don't know how anyone remains quiet while hearing this song. Awake My Soul by Mumford & Sons. Maggie, take it away.
This is Awake My Soul by Mumford & Sons. How fickle my heart and how rosy my eyes. I struggle to find any truth in your lies. And now my heart stumbles on things I don't know. My weakness I feel I must finally show. Lend me your hand and I'll conquer them all. But lend me your heart and I'll just let you fall. Lend me your eyes, I can change what you see. But your soul you must keep totally free. Oh, 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 oh. In these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die. Where you invest your love, you invest your life. In these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die. Where you invest your love, you invest your life. Awake,
change seats. I am now in the 60 West living room with my dear, dear friends. There's a theme here. Christine Jones.
And there she is again.
Today's worship is sponsored by Christine Jones.
The letters C and J.
But she's in, like, this is live right now.
Yeah, this is
Absolutely
actual
live.
me.
That is real Christine Jones right
Yes.
there. And the amazing Sandra Reisinger. How are
Amazing.
you? You are amazing.
It's true.
It's true. Believe the hype.
Yes.
Now, I have always said Reisinger. Is it Reisinger or Reisinger? I've asked you this before.
Yeah, it's kind of like everybody else in the world says Reisinger because it's actually the right pronunciation, but somewhere along the way, in my family history and tree, they decided that was the wrong pronunciation and said Reisinger.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
But every teacher always would pronounce Reisinger. So imagine being 8, 7, 9, 10.
Okay.
It's Reisinger. So now that I have more control and say so, I'm just joining the crowd. So I'm just telling everybody just say Reisinger because it just makes more sense that way.
Got it.
Yeah.
Let the record show.
Let the record show.
Yes. All right. Well, it's fun to be out of my basement, and it is fun to be here with actual humans. And this brings a lot of joy to my heart. So we're here to engage in theological exploration. And we want to let you know that Christine will be monitoring the chat. So as we move through these questions, we would love to hear your thoughts about the questions. Remember, the chat moves fast, and so Christine will likely not be able to read everything. But we look forward to hearing your thoughts and feelings about the questions we're going to discuss today. So as you saw, our post-Easter, well, it's actually the season of Easter. So our Easter series is called Now What? Now what? What to do when you don't know what to do? It seems apropos right now.
Oh, it does.
Because I feel like that is the question we're all asking. Now what? I've heard a number of people say that this time in history is uniquely challenging as we're moving toward whatever a post-COVID reality is, and I don't think any of us know what that is, but many of us are struggling with this question. And this question intersects beautifully with the post-resurrection stories. The stories where Jesus has not yet ascended, but he's just popping up all over the place. I mean, you never know where you're going to find Jesus next after the resurrection. And they're really, really beautiful stories because they are so honest. So the story we're going to explore today is timeless, but again, very, very fitting for where we are in history, because this is the ultimate now what story. So Christine, would you please read us the story of, some call it the road to Emmaus, some call it the walk to Emmaus. Now, a couple things I want to set the stage here before she reads. This is from the Gospel of Luke, and in the earlier part of the resurrection story, the disciples, or some of the disciples, realize that Jesus is not in the tomb, right? They have not yet seen him. This is important to know, but they realize he's not where they left him. And there's all this mess where the women tell the men he's gone, he's not there, and the men won't believe the women.
Shocker.
But they still haven't seen him. So keep that in mind, right? Nobody has actually encountered the resurrected Jesus yet on this day. And so you have two of the disciples here who, for whatever reason, have decided to walk to this village called Emmaus, which interestingly, many scholars think did not actually exist. That perhaps Emmaus is supposed to be a symbolic place for us, the reader, a sort of a metaphor.
I did not know that.
And
I have to rethink everything, I think.
And these disciples are named Cleopas and the other disciple. Now, this is the only place in Scripture where Cleopas exists. He clearly was not part of the inner circle of disciples, but he makes an appearance here. And many scholars believe that the other disciple is intentionally unnamed because we are supposed to understand that the other disciple is us. We, again, it's a metaphor. We are on this road with Cleopas. The other option is some scholars think the other disciple may have been a woman.
Yep, Mary. Yeah.
So, anyway, all right, so that's some background. Christine?
Okay, so I'm going to be reading from Luke 24:13 through 35 from the Message. That same day, 2 of them were walking to the village Emmaus, about 7 miles out of Jerusalem. They were deep in conversation, going over all these things that had happened. In the middle of their talk and questions, Jesus came up and walked along with them, but they were not able to recognize who he was. He asked, "What's this you're discussing so intently as you walk along?" They just stood there, long-faced, like they had lost their best friend. Then one of them, his name was Cleopas, said, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard what's happened during these last few days?" He said, "What has happened?" They said, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene. He was a man of God, a prophet, dynamic in work and word, blessed by both God and all the people. Then our high priests and leaders betrayed him, got him sentenced to death, and crucified him. And we had our hopes up that he was the one about to deliver Israel. And it is now the 3rd day since it happened. But now some of our women have completely confused us. Early this morning they were at the tomb and couldn't find his body. They came back with the story that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of our friends went off to the tomb to check and found it empty, just as the women said, but they didn't see Jesus." Then he said to them, "So thick-headed, so slow-hearted, why can't you simply believe all that the prophets said? Don't you see that these things had to happen, that the Messiah had to suffer, and only then enter into his glory?" Then he started at the beginning with the books of Moses and went on through all the prophets, pointing out everything in the scriptures that referred to him. They came to the edge of the village where they were headed. He acted as if he were going on, but they pressed him, "Stay and have supper with us. It's nearly evening. The day is done." So he went in with them. And here is what happened. He sat down at the table with them. Taking the bread, he blessed and broke and gave it to them. And at that moment, open-eyed, wide-eyed, they recognized him. Then he disappeared. Back and forth they talked. Didn't we feel on fire as he conversed with us on the road, as he opened up the scriptures for us? They didn't waste a minute. They were up and on their way back to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and their friends gathered together, talking away. "It's really happened. The Master has been raised up. Simon saw him." Then the 2 went over everything that had happened on the road and how they recognized him when he broke the bread.
Thank you. That was beautifully read. I think I would like you to call me and tell me a bedtime story.
All right. I would be happy to do that anytime, Amanda.
That was really, really lovely. All right. So there's a lot here. Mm-hmm. And Sandra, who is, you are an absolute fount of wisdom. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts.
Look at her face.
Setting that bar high.
I think you are,
yes,
too.
Yes,
I agree.
What are your initial questions and or observations after hearing the story? Like, what comes to mind?
When I first read it, when you gave this to me, my first thoughts were belief is not fixed. And Whereas all these people who were followers were like so on board, right? And then Jesus was gone. And I think that they still, because they were asking the questions they were asking, they still had a sense of the greater I am. But that in this moment, their grief consumed, the grief that he was gone consumed them. And so that impacted belief, because they had notions about what it was going to be like, and it didn't turn out that way. So that their belief was attached to something else, and now it was, I think that, I was thinking that, I think they still had this greater understanding. They wouldn't have the questions, they wouldn't have the conversations they did if they didn't still have a belief in this greater I am. It just hadn't turned out quite the way they thought it was. And then I think about my own life. And in different moments, I've always had a sense of this greater, the I am is always there. But where I'm at in my belief in that varies according to the circumstances.
Yes.
And I think that that's normal. I don't think that, I think what we're seeing here in this story seems really, I think it's what we all go through, especially related to grief. Grief's not fixed, life isn't fixed, belief isn't fixed. Yeah.
Wow. Yes.
So
Beautifully
true.
said. This reminds us, the metaphor is that of a journey. I don't know how much clearer it could be, right?
Yeah.
It's saying belief, faith, it is a journey, and it is not fixed, and we will continue to grow in various ways at various times along the way.
I was just going to say that that's why I struggle with the black and white faith, that I've always struggled with that you're in or you're out. Well, maybe. Yeah. It's just not that.
Yeah, it's never that simple.
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful message in there that yes, life is a journey, faith is a journey, belief is not fixed. And also, God shows up. Whether we're aware of it or not, God has a funny way of butting in. I always think it's the funniest scene if you think about it. These two individuals are lost in their thoughts, are lost in their, as you said, grief. And then Jesus is like, hey, what are you talking about? That would be very surprising if I was out walking along a road and some random stranger said, what's up, guys? But grace has a way of interrupting and butting in. Christine, what are you thinking, and what's the chat saying?
Well, I have a great comment here that the word that's being used is static. Belief is never static. It's waxing and waning and changing all the time. And that's another great sort of synonym for what you're talking about. My Plus group has been listening to Brene Brown's podcast series. And by the way, highly recommend. Oh my goodness. So she talks about grief. One of the episodes that we listened to recently was grief, about grief, and how it's not linear. Nothing about grief is linear. But like you're saying, that's how life is. It's kind of a reflection of how all of life is. The seasons are a circle, Nothing is linear, really, if you think about it. And when one of the things that really popped out to me as I read this version from the Message, because this is not a version of the scripture that I ever owned, and we use it so much at Rise, so it's really cool because I get to experience scripture in a different way, that sort of storytelling way. But
the thing that I thought about is how God throughout history is kind of the great interrupter.
Yep.
He's like always,
What's going on?
hey, you know, I mean, and he just like, we get in this thing where we think we're in this linear, okay, we got a place to go. Now we know what the plan is, blah, blah, blah.
We got a plan, man.
Yeah, we got a plan. And the great interrupter, you know, just always like, well, I don't know. What about this? So that's what made me think of.
I love it. All right. So we've been alluding to what this story has to say about grief and the grief process. So there's this line in here that jumped out to me. And in some translations, the message is more of a paraphrase, but it tells these stories in the most beautiful way. So again, in some translations, this line would sound something like, but we had hoped that. So here, the line that jumped out at me is, but we had our hopes up. That. But we had our hopes up. That. And then this is a little nugget that I found by a wonderful Lutheran teacher, preacher, scholar named David Luce. But it says, the disciples speak of a dream that is not to be, a dream that created energy and enthusiasm but did not materialize, a promise that created faith but proved to be false. Such a powerful phrase. It really gives you a window into where they are in their journey. So I want to invite all of us to finish this statement along with Cleopas and the other disciple. But we had our hopes up that. ... Finish that, Sandra. But we had our hopes up.
In their words or mine?
Yours, yes.
That's a scary thought. I don't want to go there. Because if it's about my own life, I had hopes that my life was going to turn out a whole lot differently. Or I had an idea. I mean, I had my hopes up that I'd be in a long-term relationship. I was long, but shouldn't have been. I had my hopes up that, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you for that, because it's interesting. So last night I was thinking about this, and it evoked a very strong response in me, which helped me realize, if you want to understand the space these disciples, these people were in, just sit with that statement yourself. Christine, but we had our hopes up.
It took me back to literally like just a rush of just points in time as I was growing up or in my adult life journey, where I could just go back to the space that I was in and that feeling of having had my hopes up about a relationship or a job or a place to live or whatever it was. A dream. I mean, that's really what it all boils down to. We have our hopes up. We have this dream or this vision of what we think is what's best for us.
Yeah.
And then having that rug pulled out from under us. And I think that the thing that so many people of faith encounter with that experience is you feel like either God has duped you or that you don't know how to hear God's voice. And both are very rattling. So it's that sense of just being really disoriented and having been duped.
Yeah.
It's not a good feeling.
especially related to this, and I would say it's also then what I've learned about in life, is that when Jesus enters into this walk with them, he starts giving a history to ground them. I mean, it's
That's
a very
good.
grounding response to them, to put them in the present, to see where they are now, to let go of whatever this bigger thing was, or hope that they had, or this false hope even. And he says, didn't the scriptures say, this was all going to happen, this was going to happen. So here it is. Here we are now. And I feel like his talk with them just puts them back into the present moment.
Yeah.
As opposed to out in the mystery of their minds. And they're wondering about, but, this wasn't, they're so confused, and it's like there's all this stuff that goes through your heads and where you're at and you're wondering about, and we're not in the palace like we thought we were going to be, and I'm not, we haven't overtaken all this stuff, and it's like, but Jesus is like, now wait a moment. Was that ever what the message was? Was that ever the message that I gave?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't say it that bluntly, but that's what I feel like he's saying, and putting their feet back on the ground.
He calls them thick-headed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, why you still don't get it?
That's a beautiful way to interpret his history lesson.
Yeah.
Because one could read this and think, what an odd response, right? As they're walking along, he starts offering a history lesson. It feels borderline insensitive, but that's a beautiful way to see that. He's grounding them. He's reminding them of their story.
Yeah. And where God was in, I think that for my own life, and it's like where God was in my life all that time, when I'm having these hopes that I think are being dashed, or that life is hard, or nothing's turning out the way, and then I stop, and then I somehow it can be an encounter on the street with someone, and there's just this moment of like, oh my God, you're here. You're here. Yeah.
So you hear so much grief here. Obviously, they are grieving his death and this enormous loss. But what you hear in that statement is they're grieving dreams. They're grieving what could have been. And I believe it is important to name those spaces. Right? To acknowledge what we'd hoped for. And so I think there's a lot to learn about how to journey with others in times and spaces of grief here. If we're talking about what to do when you don't know what to do, perhaps a grounding story that says, this is who and whose you are. Remember who and whose you are can be an enormous gift. But also acknowledging how painful it is to have hoped, to have dreamt, to have a dream that created energy and enthusiasm but did not materialize. That is a particular and very painful kind of grief that many of us, for a whole host of reasons, will not acknowledge. And so we carry that pain within us. What's the chat saying?
So some really, it's resonating, having hopes up for career, adoption, and comparing this feeling of the loss of a dream to abandonment. And that's big. That's heavy.
That's big. Yeah.
Marty did a comment, Simba, remember who you are. And when Amanda said that, I had the big, like, glittery Mufasa.
Remember.
And that remember, James Earl Jones's voice, remember. That's exactly what came to my mind as well. But it's that's so true. It's and often here's the irony. It's like really what you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
When you're in those spaces, right? Which is probably why he called them thick-headed. But but isn't that true? It's like that's not what we want to hear when we're feeling those feelings of like, yeah. You know, that tends to be our response. Like, I know that God's always been there, and yeah, I can look back at my life and see those things, but that's not, like you say, that doesn't honor the pain that I'm feeling right now. So maybe there's something to be said for having both, you know, of hearing the thing that we may not want to hear but may need to hear, but also honoring that feeling of grief and abandonment and disappointment.
What's echoing in my head right now is a poem, I think it's by Langston Hughes, about a dream deferred. Don't quote me on that, or someone can Google me, but it is the most powerful piece about this very thing, about how painful a dream deferred can be, a dream that does not come to fruition. And I'm sitting here, you know, in 60 West, and again, it's so good to be back here, but this place holds memories.
Yeah.
We've only been here 4 to 5 years, but it still holds a lot of moments and memories. I think that many of us are in a space right now in time where we're grieving what could have been. Right? There's some grief of maybe what could have been in this space, in physical spaces and moments that didn't happen. There's also so much possibility at the same time. And if we can hold the pain and honor the pain, but also say, but let's take a moment and remember. I wonder if there's a way to hold both of those together in great love. Because this is hard. It is hard to have hoped and realize that your hopes did not materialize. It is hard to name dreams that did not come to fruition. That is grief. And many of us are experiencing that right now.
Yeah, individually and collectively.
Yes. I do love the fact that in this story, they are together as a smaller part of this community grieving together. So that's really beautiful. I think if we're asking now what, there's a message in don't do this work alone, please. They're processing together. They're sharing their loss together. They're naming that their dream is deferred together. And then Jesus butts in, and they don't even realize it. Which is a great segue to the next question. Have you ever had, Sandra, an experience where you struggled to recognize God in your midst? And what do you think caused that struggle?
What causes the struggle is my belief, like their belief in what they thought it would mean, what would happen if you were faithful, or if people were actively faithful or together. And the moments where that stands out to me are in the midst of violence. For me, in the midst of, because as a kid, I had this idea, like I don't know if you recall, I say I wanted to get on the Jesus wagon even as a young child because it meant the hungry would be fed, that there would be peace, there would be, love. And I still have this strong belief in that, but the places where that gets messed up or when I'm in situations of violence and violence of severe hunger, where I've sat with a starving baby and held a starving baby dying, or in in a camp in Myanmar where people have been running from violence and sheltering together in protective camps for years, and sitting with them and listening to their stories, and I'm like, and it's like, I don't know how to hold on to that faith in those moments. And on a more personal basis, in the marriage I was in, that was really, really hard. Yeah.
How did God show up in any of those moments? How did God butt in?
God butts in when I would see a newer baby suckling its mother's breast in those same camp situations. In the life of a woman who was 90 who'd survived so much. Yeah. Personally, my kids always showed up, reminded me. Encounters just with people in different ways that saw me. Yeah, people who saw me. Yeah.
Thank you. Christine, have you ever had an experience where you struggled to recognize God in your midst?
Oh, I don't know. All the time. Yes. Yeah. I mean, like, who doesn't, like, immediately say, yeah. It's just so a part of who we are, I think, as people, to not be able to see the forest for the trees. Like, that's just so how we are, right? But I think that's where that revisiting comes in, because if I can be in my present situation and not see God, there's always places that I can go to that I live through where I do. Mm-hmm. And that's it. That's the story, right? That's the nonlinear sort of nature of our lived experience. Is all of that tells the story of how we got to where we are, and we wouldn't have survived those things had God not carried us through. So that has been huge for me. If I can't see God where I am, look outside of this moment in time and look outside of my own story, because God's always working somewhere, and it is a very intentional, I think. Sometimes you do have to be intentional to look. Adam said, sometimes God's too close for me to recognize. So that's the opposite of what I'm saying, which is, that still small voice that we just miss because of all the noise. So,
oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
God is our breath.
Yeah, sometimes God is, and maybe that's what was going on that road. I think they were absolutely in what I often call the grief fog, which that fog can settle in us for a long time, and sometimes it'll clear and then return when we least expect it. But also that they just didn't see him. Now, interestingly, they saw him in the breaking of the bread. They saw him at dinner. Now, we don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of symbolism there about Holy Communion and, but what are your thoughts about that? They saw him at dinner around a table, breaking bread together, literally. What does that say to us?
This may be a tangent, but as I was reading this, I was thinking, I looked back into on John and Matthew and Mark, and the length of each of those books. This part of the story is 1 or 2 chapters of the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And now Jesus is going back in this moment. In this moment, he's going back and eating dinner, sitting down at the table, taking walks, going fishing in, I think is that Luke or Matthew? Going fishing.
Mm-hmm.
The everyday of life, and Jesus is there in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he's taking them back to, or taking them towards, maybe instead of back to, towards being present in the moment of every day. And Jesus is in all of those moments. And this is only 1 or 2 chapters of their life together.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of stood out to me, that it's only 1 or 2 chapters in the whole story. And he's reminding them, because he also says, something about going fishing. But he's reminding them that life is moving, going on, and I've taught you how to live this life.
Mm-hmm.
Keep living what I've told you.
I love it. And what a beautiful reminder that, is there anything much more ordinary than supper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? But that's so Jesus.
Yeah.
To show up in the ordinary. I just think it's an interesting question. Why did they realize what was going on in that moment? All right, let's segue to the final question, because I do want to land this by asking, what does this story, the Walk to Emmaus story, have to say to us about our feelings of now what, especially in times of grief and loss? Are there lessons we can learn? Now, we've hinted at them here and there along the way, but I'm just so keenly aware of how many of us, myself most of all, are in this space. I don't know what to do in so many ways right now. I've heard many people say, while complete lockdown was indescribably hard, at least I knew what the rules were. At least I was terrified, but I had a sense of where the boundaries should be. And now I think many of us are like, okay, things have just gotten really, really murky. Many of us are grieving, dreams deferred, hopes that did not materialize, at least not yet. Many of us are grieving the loss of those we care deeply for. Some of us are grieving the loss of relationships. There's an enormous amount of grief. So, what can we learn from this story about now what?
Go fishing.
Well, you go with what you know.
Yeah.
That's the thing that stands out to me in the story is so they were deeply in grief, but they were walking to go somewhere. They had to stop. They had to eat dinner. They had to rest. So if, when you don't know what to do, just do the things that you do know what to do, and you just keep going. And it eventually becomes clear. It always does. It always does. Sometimes it's just that waiting game of okay, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to get dressed. I'm going to brush my teeth and I'm going to, I'm going to eat my breakfast. It's that list of what do I know that I can do to love the people in my life and take care of myself right now, because I don't know what else to do, but I do know that I can do this. And then eventually it becomes clear, and sometimes it takes a short time and sometimes it takes a long time.
Yeah. And there's obviously a beautiful message in here about Jesus interrupting or butting in. Sometimes we don't realize that it's the divine in our midst. And the divine tends to show up in very ordinary moments, which is, like you said, then do ordinary things. Because God has a funny way of showing up in really ordinary moments. I'm thinking right now of an aunt I had who experienced an indescribable amount of grief in her life. And she used to say, I would set goals for myself to make it through the next hour.
Yeah.
Or the next 6 hours. And sometimes the next 30 minutes, depending on the moment I was in. But there is great wisdom in when you need to just do what feels familiar. When everything feels untethered, do what feels familiar. And again, remain in community. You do not see either of these people walking alone on the road. What were you going to say, Sandra?
Well, I think that I feel like I need to become comfortable with unknowing. And because it's in unknowing where God steps in. So, or we actually experience, God's always there. But it's when we live into unknowing, we don't know what it's going to be like. We send in a college application, we don't know what the result of that is. So we live into and accept that we don't know. And when we can live into unknowing, then that's a space where we can see God.
Told you she's full of wisdom.
If we think we know everything, where is there room for God? But if we let go of needing to know, well, then you live the next 30 minutes. That's what you do. And there's room for God to show up, for you to see God showing up. Yeah. I mean, that's what my hope's going to be crushed in that I'll never live into that.
But I had so hoped that.
I will.
Well, the thing that comes to mind as you're talking, Sandra, is like that need to know, like we need to know. I need to know. We're so built for that, right? And what that really boils down to is control.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what you're talking about is control. But when I think about the times that I have been the most trusting, I guess, in my journey is when I've been able to just go one step at a time with my hands open. Because even if you're mourning a dream that's lost, how can you get a new one if you're white knuckling the old one? You've got to, it's that whole thing of like, well, that didn't work, and I'm sad, and I'm angry, but I'm going to open my hands believing that there's another one that can be put in my hand if I let go of this one. And I have found that to be true in my life. But if you are forever white knuckling that thing that you so hoped, then you're going to miss it. God can't put anything in your hand if it's closed. So, hands open.
Beautifully said. I think we could talk for the next hour, but I'm going to land us here.
I'm going to run out of wisdom.
Sandra's out of wisdom.
She's like,
so
I'm
we gotta
all
wrap
out.
This up.
Tapped
She's
out.
done. All right, our final song today. I'm sitting here thinking, man, this really is perfect. Sometimes you just get it right. And we've actually played this quite a bit lately. But this song speaks to a road full of promise and possibility. But also, if you listen to the lyrics, it says there was a dream. It talks about this very thing we've been talking about a dream that perhaps didn't materialize in the ways one might expect. So, if you can, listen to how much this song works for our discussion today in this story. So this is Head Full of Doubt, Road Full of Promise, I'm wondering if they wrote this for this scripture, by the Avett Brothers, played by Amy Martin. So Amy, take it away.
There's a darkness upon me that's flooded in light. In the fine print they tell me what's wrong and what's right. And it comes in black and it comes in white, and I'm frightened by those who don't see it. But nothing is owned, deserved, or expected. And your life doesn't change by the man that's elected. If you're loved by someone you never rejected, decide what to be and go be it. There was a dream, and one day I could see it. Like a bird in its cage, I broke in and demanded that somebody free it. And there was a kid with a head full of doubt. So I screamed till I die, and the last of those bad thoughts are finally out. There's a darkness upon you that's flooded in light. In the fine print they tell you what's wrong and what's right. And it flies by day and it flies by night, and I'm frightened by those who don't see it. There was a dream, and one day I could see it. Like a bird in its cage, I broke in and demanded that somebody free it. And there was a kid with a head full of doubt. So I screamed till I die, and the last of those bad thoughts are finally out. There's a darkness upon me that's flooded in light. In the fine print they tell me what's wrong and what's right. And it comes in black and it comes in white, and I'm frightened by those who don't see it.
It's pretty amazing how Amy can enter into this exact space that we're in. We've decided we have a portal here at 60 West that is pretty mysterious.
Now you see her, now you don't. That's right. Magic Man.
Oh man, what a great song. Christine was just saying she could read Avett Brothers lyrics all day.
All day.
Yes, all day. And
Love
by the
them.
way, just quickly researched that poem that I referenced earlier. It is called Harlem, but it is where Langston Hughes talks about a dream deferred. What happens to a dream deferred? And it is incredible. So, one final plug for our offering here. Please, if you can, remember us, Venmo, PayPal, cash, check. There's the magical scroll. Thank you, Chris. And by the way, thank you, Chris Holler, for making us look so good and
Yes.
sound even better. We are so grateful for you. Thank you to our virtual greeter, Sarah, and to everyone who works hard to make our virtual worship experience so special. All right. Our final blessing today is written by Jan Richardson. a poet, pastor, theologian, and amazing human. And this is simply called an Emmaus blessing. So, Sandra, would you please bring us home with this Emmaus blessing?
Emmaus blessing. Already a blessing in the walking, already a blessing on the road, already a blessing drawing near, already a blessing in the listening, already a blessing in the burning hearts, already a blessing in the almost evening, already a blessing in the staying, already a blessing at the table, already a blessing in the bread, already a blessing in the breaking, already a blessing finally known, already a blessing, give us eyes, already a blessing, let us see.
Thank you. And thank you for being here, both of you. I just love being out of my basement. So tune in next week for week 4, Easter week 4, as we continue to ask the question, now what? And we'll continue exploring these post-resurrection stories that have so much to say to us right now. Remember to send us information about graduates you may know. We need your help making sure that we recognize everyone on May the 2nd, and mark your calendars. May the 2nd, 2 o'clock, Purcell Park. Stop in and let's have some much needed joy and celebration. Have a beautiful week. Remember that you are a gift. Bye, everyone.